Sifu's first major update is disappointing. I wish it weren't the case because I love this game so much despite its big flaws, but I can't deny it, I'm really let down. It's been a while since I got angry writing a script, and I didn't think it would be Sifu that would bring me to this point. If you haven't seen my official review of this game, I recommend you check that out. It goes into detail about the major issues I have with it in addition to all the praise I gave it. In this update, the stuff they changed was based on feedback they've been getting directly for months, and the issues I brought up in my video that they actually addressed were those issues that have been pointed out since February. And unfortunately, the issues I brought up that were more unique to my review have not been addressed at all. So let's go over the actual improvements they've implemented, the many things the game still desperately needs,
and the atrocity that is easy mode.
What the heck? Stepped on branch.
Oh, that's the new level. They just released it. So many people in Asia complained it was too easy, so they made this.
There's a new dark mode for the menus, fabulous. Still amazing it wasn't there from the beginning, but great, it's here now, and I'll never go back. There's now a robust practice mode. You can spawn in any enemy that you've faced and practice guarding and punishing. You can even spawn in multiple enemies. This is great. However, you can't set up different combinations of enemies. You can only have one enemy type at a time, which is a decision I don't understand at all. Please someone explain why.
Okay, how? How is it disappointing? Okay, I love Sifu too. I beat all the bosses and spared them all multiple times. It's a great game, and it's really fucking hard regardless of what option you play on, because I played in multiple difficulties, but it's still hard. So I'm not sure what you're getting at here. First off, it's not even easy mode, it's called student. And second off, how is it an atrocity if you still have to maintain understanding the mechanics of the game just to beat it? That's right, on student mode, you're not gonna just get away with dicking around. You have to still maintain your skill level and maintain the mechanics of the game just to actually beat people. Yeah, I tried doing that spam thing that you were talking about. Couldn't do it. I could not spam my way to win even on student difficulty, which means that they did a good job balancing the difficulty, so...
This might be hard to believe, but are you aware that nobody gives a shit?
What are you talking about? So let me get this straight. You have an issue with the fact that there's a bunch of different enemies, but you can't spawn in multiple... Okay, I guess I can give you some leeway, but I have to admit that that is such a small, insignificant nitpick. But fine, whatever, Mayo. I'll give you some leeway on that. They could have allowed you to spawn multiple different types of enemies. Wow. I mean, I'm just saying that's not even really a big deal, but fine, I'll give you some leeway on that. Again, that's a really small nitpick. That's probably a small issue with the game that they have to patch. But seriously, can you really get to real serious issues instead of nitpicks like this? Because this doesn't really affect the overall gaming experience. You do realize that, right? Yes, I guess they could have given you different environments, but me, I don't really care. I just want to enjoy the game itself, and if I go into practice mode, I want to be able to practice. I don't care how you make the environment. Now, it would be a bonus if the environment had different environments. Yeah, that'd be cool. But I mean, in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, you had the same Animus room, no matter what. Nobody complained about that, so why are they complaining about this? That's kind of a contradiction, really, because people should complain about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood at that point. What's wrong with the simple square dojo? Alright, I'll admit that was kind of funny. But still, in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, you had the same Animus room. Okay? So I don't understand why people can complain about this, but not complain about that. That's kind of a contradiction, really. Because people should really be complaining about AC Brotherhood. You had the same Animus room no matter how many chain kills you got.
You can also practice against bosses, which is pretty damn cool. You can even set it to phase 1 or phase 2. There's an option to replay the tutorial, but I see no button prompt next to it. If I activate my keyboard, it says it's the C key, but then on the controller, it's nothing? What's up with this? Does anyone else have this issue? What am I missing? I wish they'd give us options for different practice environments. At least something that isn't this awful, ugly red room where you can barely distinguish the walls. What's wrong with this simple square dojo? I call this mode a practice mode instead of a training mode because it's missing vital aspects needed to learn the game. As I said in my review, Sifu absolutely fails at getting players to understand the importance of avoiding attacks and punishing to activate stun windows. It's the main mechanic of the game and they don't even mention it.
No, that's a specific playstyle that you realized about the game. That doesn't mean the game has to tell you every specific playstyle about it. That's really stupid, and that's unfair because you're basically judging the game based off of what you discovered about the game. You can't judge a game based off of the fact that, hey, in Kingdom Hearts, they don't teach you the fact that you have to specifically stagger enemies in a specific way to prevent yourself from getting attacked from the revenge value system. Now, what is the revenge value? Well, it's basically how they retaliate. Okay, so that keeps you from spamming. So the game doesn't really tell you this, but yet it's still a masterpiece of action RPG design. So Sifu doesn't have to tell you every specific about its mechanics in order to be masterfully done, which it is. And that's all that really matters. You just have to understand that the game doesn't hold your hand. Sifu is not a game that holds your hand and tells you about every specific mechanic, but it actually does a good job of building you up to some of the harder enemies. That's why the club is there. The club is to weed a lot of that out for you to master those mechanics, as you know, even earlier in the game. You can't really get mad at Sifu when Dark Souls had this huge asylum boss in the very first area of the game. So honestly, that's really hypocritical. You might as well get on Dark Souls. What are you talking about? In the very first level of the game, they mention how to dodge enemies' attacks. Then they teach you how to parry in the very beginning of the game when you're doing all the cool combos and techniques in the very first opening scene. So that's not true. So where are you getting this from? That's not what caused them to lose half their player base. What caused them to lose half their player base was the fact that people did not understand how to play the game, because Sifu, a lot like Dark Souls, is not going to tell you every specific about its mechanics, but it teaches you some of the most important mechanics in the game. Parrying and dodging and weaving. It literally teaches you that in the game, so where are you getting this from? And people still couldn't handle it, but I did. You know, somehow I just pushed through it. It was not easy. It was not easy. It took so many tries to beat the club. It took a lot, but I made it. And when I did, I was very proud of myself. And then I started trying to get to the other bosses as well. This was not easy, and Sifu does not hold your hand. But just because it doesn't hold your hand doesn't mean it doesn't teach you the mechanics. It teaches you parry, and it teaches you dodging and weaving. Some of the most important mechanics in the game to beat some of the hardest bosses, including Yang. You can't bring up specific mechanics of a game that you discovered, right? That's like realizing in Dark Souls, hey, you know, I can parry and dodge. And I can also parry attacks in a certain way to keep them from trying to just hit me. You know what I'm saying? So if you parry an attack in Dark Souls, but then you go on YouTube and say, look, Dark Souls has a problem. Dark Souls doesn't teach you that you can parry certain attacks from bosses and do this amazing stuff. Or you can use poise, or you can use this. Okay, it doesn't have to, because it teaches you the basic mechanics of the game, and that's all that matters. Everything else is something you're going to have to figure out on your own.
They hide it away in a tiny button on the detective board like it's not important, when it's single-handedly the thing that caused them to lose half their player base. People not understanding the avoid and stun system. That directional throw can be used during the stun state after an avoid and punish. All that stuff. And I'm so disappointed to see that they haven't addressed this in the slightest. There is nothing in practice mode that takes a player through the stun mechanic. Something like avoid this enemy's attacks and then punish quickly to put them in stun and then throw them. Do it 3 times to pass the stage. Basics. Basic game mechanics are still not featured in this game. So who cares about being able to spawn 3 enemies at a time?
Remember, this is a roguelite. A roguelite is a game where when you die, dude, you gotta really, you kind of set back for a while. You know, it's a big deal. And you start to age, and it has an effect. And you can't just get away with stuff. And you cannot just spam even on student difficulty either. Try spamming on student difficulty. Try doing that. Now, yeah, I understand that you showed a controller of you doing the same technique, but a lot of people who are playing the game and taking it very seriously are not going to be able to just do that. Because that same analogy can really be applied to Street Fighter. When you press triangle, you find a way how to beat Street Fighter with just triangle. Was that easy? Well, probably not. And not only that, but it's also frustrating to play like that. It's a lot better to play with the actual mechanics of the game itself and learning how to do combos, techniques, and learning how to do attacks that are all in the menu. It has a very robust combat system with so many different attack moves and strategies and techniques. And you're brushing past all that because you found a specific playstyle that works for you. And you're saying, oh, the game doesn't teach you this specific playstyle that I know, so therefore there's something wrong with it. That doesn't make any sense, Mayo. I'm just saying. Now, I understand your criticism about the dojo. I understand your other criticisms. You know, some of those nitpicks are nitpicky, like, oh, enemies, there shouldn't be the same kind of enemy in, like, there should be different kinds of enemies and stuff like that you can spawn in at once. Okay, fine, I'll give you some leeway on that, whatever. Even though that's a nitpick, fine. But dude, really? Oh, I found a specific playstyle of the game. Therefore, the game should teach you this specific playstyle that I learned in a game that doesn't even hold your hand. A game that's meant to be that way on purpose to make it harder on purpose. That makes no sense. You might as well be getting on Dark Souls.
You're still not showing people what kind of game they're getting themselves into. I can't believe it. We also still cannot select which enemy we want to attack when triggering focus attacks. If there are multiple enemies around you, the game chooses the closest one by default when that's not even who I wanted to target. There can be multiple enemies in range, but you can only target one. Why can't they make it where one of the left or right buttons cycles through available targets? That shouldn't be that hard to do.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
We also still cannot select which enemy we want to attack when triggering focus attacks.
If there are multiple enemies around you, the game chooses the closest one by default when that's not even who I wanted to target.
There can be multiple enemies in range, but you can only target one. Why can't they make it where one of the left or right buttons cycles through available targets? That shouldn't be that hard to do.
Mayo, again, you keep asking the game to teach you specific mechanics that really are taught through experience. The game is not going to teach you every specific mechanic about the combat system that you learned. For instance, if you take some abilities in Kingdom Hearts 2, right? You can actually take the abilities of Sora and you can take some of them away, so the only abilities that he has are specific abilities, specific techniques. You understand? So if that's the case, then guess what? If you can do something like that in Kingdom Hearts 2, what about Sifu? All right? So in Sifu, you might learn a specific technique, a specific kind of move. Does that mean that the game is imbalanced because it doesn't teach you these specific techniques? No. It just means that there's specific techniques in the game that you can utilize to beat people. In Kingdom Hearts, you can use specific abilities to beat people. Certain abilities that the game is not going to tell you, it's only in the ability chart. You have to discover it on your own and equip it and try it out for yourself and see what works. This is called player accountability. Players have to take accountability for the fact that the game itself is showing you its systems. You just have to actually go with it, even if it doesn't hold your hand. And this is what makes it so difficult to experience games like this, because you have to take accountability for how difficult the game is. That's why. The game is not easy. You played this on Deathless and you're saying this? Come on. Basic game mechanics are not featured. Oh, you are objectively wrong. It teaches you how to dodge. It teaches you how to block. It teaches you how to parry in the game. Parrying and dodging are two of the most important mechanics in this game. You can get so many attack windows from doing that. It's just the truth. When you dodge attacks, you can do so good in Sifu. You can even beat Yang doing that. So what are you talking about? Oh, and that applies especially to arenas. Arenas are difficult. They're usually in the disciple difficulty, very hard. And when you play in the arena, that same exact attack and strategies and skills that you learn from the game, because the game doesn't hold your hand, those work. Try playing the Matrix one, the one inspired from the Matrix. I'm the one. Try doing that and using dodging and parrying. The same techniques that the game showed you. So that's objectively wrong. The game actually shows you those techniques. So that's not true. You're wrong. Slow Clap did show you in the very first tutorial. Remember the tutorial that you wanted to skip because you felt like, I think later on in the video, he wants to skip it. Don't worry. And you know, the tutorial that you wanted to skip is actually the tutorial that shows you a lot of those things. And the game also shows you some more things throughout the beginning of the game, but then that's it. So that's not entirely accurate. The game shows you these things. So again, If the game shows you its mechanics, dodging, parrying, weaving, what are you talking about? You're claiming that the game's not showing you, but it shows you these mechanics throughout the game. It shows you in the tutorial. It also shows you in the very first level. So that's not true. Okay, fine, Mayo. God, Jesus. All right. They could have allowed you to pick or lock on to specific enemies. Jesus Christ, Mayo. Do you ever give a game a break? I understand that you're very critical of games. I get that. But that criticism is the biggest nitpick. What matters is the overall game, not, oh no, whenever you lock on, it doesn't let you choose who you specifically lock on to. Okay, it's not, everything doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Jesus, Mayo, come on. And that's the focus bar. I mean, dude, the entire combat mechanics are pretty robust. You gotta at least give it that. I mean, there's tons of games. Who the fuck cares? There's tons of games that don't have a lock on, okay? And those games are not criticized for that. Sometimes people bring it up, but they don't make that big a deal out of it because not every game has a lock-on system. You realize that, right? Because some games don't really need it necessarily. Sifu is one of them. You don't need the lock-on. I was able to pick which specific enemy I wanted to focus on every single solitary time because the game does a very good job with its systems. And that's just the truth. And those are the facts. When you do a good job with your systems, those are the facts. And that's what Sifu does. It does a very good job with its combat mechanics, and it does a fantastic job with its systems. So honestly, you're kind of downplaying a lot of the hard work Slow Clap put into that. And again, Mayo, all right, Jesus, I'll give you some leeway. Maybe they could have just made it to where you can cycle through targets. Yes, but I was able to literally pinpoint enemies regardless. So I really don't see it as a thing that really matters. It's not the end of the world, especially if there's other games that don't have a lock-on functionality.
Enemy magnetism doesn't feel like it's been changed at all. I don't have a huge problem with the magnetism in general, but it's too strong and you can just get snapped into attacking someone behind you because they're closer than the enemy in front of you. It sucks. It's not game breaking, but it's irritating when it happens. They've also made it to where the camera doesn't zoom in when doing takedowns in a lot of combat situations, which is a change that I hate. I'm aware some people found it disorienting, but without that camera movement, the impact from these takedowns is gone. I don't feel excited by them anymore. They've lost their cinematic intensity. Now it's just waiting for your character to finish an animation before you continue fighting, which is what it was before, but it didn't feel like that. Now it does. I need someone in the Sifu community to direct me to a mod to fix it, and if anyone at Slow Clap is watching this, I'm begging you for at least a menu option to restore the original cinematic takedowns. Please.
If I'm not mistaken, when it comes to the zoom in and takedowns, I think they eventually fixed this, if I'm not mistaken. The impact from takedowns doesn't feel as, I know, right? Actually, there's something we agree on. Remember, Mayo, I watch your content. I love your work. It's just some of the things you say is not only hypocritical, but extremely contradictory, and it drives me crazy. And you tend to not be very reasonable with games. So this is what makes me get like this. I know, right? When he said please, I'm like, I know, right? Yes, please. The cinematic takedowns, I believe they got restored because those cinematic takedowns are phenomenal. There goes something we actually agree on. I give you some leeway there. Because cinematic takedowns add to the atmosphere and a turmoil and emotional depth and atmosphere and tone of the takedown. So yeah.
And the overall camera has not been fixed. It's still just as bad as it has been. I think it's incredible that they haven't implemented a simple transparency feature to walls and textures so the camera can stay back at a reasonable distance. Yeah, this update just hasn't done much to improve this game.
Oh, please. He says there's something wrong with the camera. There's nothing wrong with the camera, dude. There's nothing wrong with it. The camera's just fine. I'm not sure what you're talking about here. The camera works really well to the point which you can fight multiple enemies at once without it needing a lock-on functionality. That's really good because most games will just give you some kind of lock-on functionality, which honestly, I don't really always use because I need a free open camera to beat all these guys. For instance, Kingdom Hearts, I almost never use the lock-on, even on a boss fight, because I need the camera and character to be free and open to really defeat him with more speed and variety.
We now have easy and hard difficulties, which I'm very happy about. Sifu does such a horrible job at teaching its mechanics to new players that I welcome an easier experience to help struggling players ease into the game.
When you say easy and hard difficulty, actually it's student and disciple. So that means that the difficulty is modified, meaning that the developers have modified it to a certain sense that you still requires challenge, but it's just a little bit more lenient. Now let's read that carefully. An easier difficult level for players who want an experience that is more forgiving but still challenging. Keywords, still and challenging. So it is still challenging. I played the difficulty, Mayo, so it's not just too easy. That is very wrong. Yes, it does teach new mechanics to new players. Yes, it does. It teaches you, again, how to parry, how to dodge, how to block, how to weave. These are very important, and you even said it yourself that these are some of the most important mechanics that you need in order to beat bosses. It teaches you those mechanics, so where are you getting this from? Stop saying false information about the game that is not accurate. If the game teaches you how to dodge, if the game teaches you how to parry, if the game teaches you how to do these things, then what are you talking about? That is factually incorrect.
And of course, a hard mode for veterans is a great idea. Hard mode is a bit of a mixed bag. Overall, I like it. You have less life and structure, enemies have stronger defense, so get ready to get parried if you're getting too aggressive, and enemies are noticeably more aggressive themselves. There's a lot less standing around and waiting while their friends take turns attacking. You can easily get overwhelmed by groups, especially when heavy enemies are involved. The fat guys are brutal, the bodyguards feel harder to punish, and they just live forever. It's really important to control your space and not let yourself get cornered. The fights themselves have not been changed at all, which is surprising. I was expecting a little bit of a remix, maybe an extra heavy in certain rooms. That would have been really cool. Boss fights are now crazy. 50-50s, man. 50-50s everywhere. It's like Slow Clap said, how can we make every boss way more annoying? Let's give them more sweep attacks and 50-50s that'll nail anyone without good reactions. Well, it works. Boss fights feel way less predictable now. It feels like sweeps can come out at any time. Strings that used to be punishable aren't punishable anymore. It's a pretty serious change. I don't feel like I'm just waiting for the pattern and then punishing. Fights feel a lot more improvisational and reaction-based. It's good. Karaoke Phase 2 is a nightmare, and Ginseng, who I already struggled with, is uniquely annoying. Yang is not so bad, actually. He doesn't feel nearly as extreme as some of the others, while Karaoke took 20 years off my life. So yeah, hard mode has some good things in it, and some aspects that are disappointing. But overall, I'm generally okay with it, and I'll be playing it like this for the foreseeable future. Since we now have multiple difficulties, I think it's become important to add additional save profiles. I have a profile on normal with most moves unlocked, I have my hard mode profile, and I have my girlfriend's normal profile because she's learning how to play. For this video, I wanted to try out easy mode. Well, I have to delete one if I want to try that difficulty. That's pretty dumb.
Alright, Mayo. Reiterate that you bring up some of the most insignificant nitpicks that are not the end of the world. Oh no, I have to get rid of a save profile. So I'm just gonna replay the game a bunch of times anyway. So what's the difference?
So let's get to easy mode.
The controversial easy mode.
Controversial easy mode. Yeah, for you it's controversial. What the hell is so controversial about an easier difficulty? Are you serious? What would be controversial is if a game like Dark Souls did it, because From Software has been capitalizing on it for years, and fans have loved its difficulty for years. So since that's been around much longer than Sifu, yeah, that would be controversial for Dark Souls, of course. But for something like Sifu that just came out at that time, no, it would not be controversial. It would kind of be just a part of the game. So that's not true. And you claimed it was bad. Oh, really? What is so bad about it? What? An easier difficulty has been added to a video game. Look out. The horror. Like, Mayo, calm down. So if you respect that a lot, you have to understand the fact that the game actually does do that even on the student difficulty. Something that respects the player's time and something that lets the players have to utilize the game's mechanics in order to succeed, not just spamming. Yes, you cannot just spam in student difficulty. It's not easy. I understand that you have some kind of clip of spamming.
Easy mode.
Yeah.
Are you having fun?
No.
Are you at least learning something?
No.
Does this make you like Sifu?
Not really.
Okay, what?
Alright, Mayo. Tenkaichi 2.
One hand. One hand. Does that mean that this game is imbalanced? Does that mean that this game is imbalanced, Mayo? Does that mean that this game is imbalanced? No. Jesus.
What do you think they could do to make this mode
better. Maybe a style move. Oh my god.
Because that's just your skill level. You're just really good at the game. So you can't do that and then push that onto the game, because that's not fair to the game itself. If I'm really good at Street Fighter, I'm gonna understand the mechanics so well that I could actually do it with one hand. I'll give you a perfect example. Tenkaichi 3. I understand the full level of the mechanics of the game just about to a T. So I'm actually able to play with one singular hand, and I can beat people with one hand. Does that mean the game is imbalanced on easier difficulties because I'm able to beat it with one hand on a harder one? No. Or you can beat it with one hand on an easier difficulty. Does that still mean the game's imbalanced? No. The game is not imbalanced. You just need to realize the fact that you're just good at the game. So yeah, you have a skill level. That doesn't mean that it's too easy, because a lot of people still left at the club part, regardless. So that's not true. There's a lot of people who left at the club even on the easier difficulty. I just pushed on through. I said, dude, I have to fucking do this shit because this game is too amazing. This is one of the greatest combat systems ever made. And there's no way that I'm just gonna stay at this club and I'm not gonna stop now. I gotta fucking do this shit. The game is too goddamn beautiful, too incredible. The soundtrack, the atmosphere, the tone, the roguelike setting, the excellent fucking mechanics. Holy fuck, all the different combos and techniques. I'm a sucker for combat systems. I like multiple combos, and much like you, Mayo, I like it when it's 15 different enemies fighting me at once. That's how I like it, okay? But when you get good at games like this, you have to consider the fact that other people might be struggling, okay? So you might be so good that you can play with one hand. I'm so good at Tenkaichi 3, I can play that with one hand. Whether it's on an easier or even a harder difficulty, I can play it on level 2 difficulty with one hand. Level 1 and 2, completely with one hand. Yeah. Does that mean the game is imbalanced? No, Mayo. It doesn't. It means you're just good at the game. You have to understand that. You cannot take out your issue with the fact that you're good at a game out on the game and be unreasonable with the game, especially when they were generous enough to add a difficulty option. They didn't have to do that. They could have pulled a firm software and said fuck it. So you gotta appreciate that. A lot of people could not overcome the brutal challenge in level 2. Yes, I was mentioning that before. Okay, so you have to consider the fact that people had a rough time, and Slow Clap was actually generous enough to give us an easier difficulty. That's a great thing, and yet it still requires challenge, because if you try to spam, it doesn't really work too well, especially with boss fights. And I know because I tried spamming, because I got frustrated because it was that hard. I was having a rough time with Sifu, and I loved it so fucking much, and I was having a rough time when I first got a PC because my brother was generous enough to allow me to have a PC. Because he got a new one, so he let me have his old one. So when I started playing with it, I realized the fact that this game is rough, and I was having a rough time, and I said, I can't take it, I just have to do this. So I started playing it kind of like how I would play some of the older Street Fighters. I'm just gonna, go in, and I started spamming a little bit, and I started spamming a lot, and I got beat the fuck down until I learned how to do these 3 things: parrying, dodging, and weaving. When I learned how to do these things, I no longer spammed. And actually, it was no need to spam, because I did even better than when I was trying to do that. And that wasn't even working anyway. This is on student difficulty. I figured this out. Student. You understand? Then I started playing on Disciple for the arenas. So I just switched between playing arena on Disciple and playing the story on student just to get a good feel of the game. And it worked pretty well. I ended up beating all the bosses and sparing them all multiple times. So yeah, the game is actually very refined and balanced, even on the easier difficulties. You can't call them snobby because you're belittling them for their easy difficulty, so you can't talk. So that's not accurate. Plus, they were just frustrated because they had a rough time with the game. You're claiming that the game doesn't teach you the mechanics. That's objectively wrong, because it teaches you how to dodge, weave, and parry. So where are you getting this from? Oh, and block. Wrong. A game that poorly communicates its core mechanics. Wrong. Wrong. I just saw it. The core mechanics of Sifu, some of the most important mechanics, parrying, blocking, dodging, and weaving. It teaches you all these things. It teaches you certain things in the tutorial menu. It teaches you in the very first level. And it teaches you these things, so that's not true. And if it teaches you these things in the game, then it's teaching you some of the most important mechanics that you need. But it's also a roguelike, so it's not going to hold your hand. So what did you expect, Mayo? You're being unreasonable. Because if it's a roguelike, then that means that at some point, the game has to challenge you. Okay, and you're mad about the fact that it's challenging you? That's the point of the game, even on an easier difficulty. So where are you getting this from? You're being unreasonable because if the game challenges you, oh, wait, that's a problem. You didn't teach me the mechanics. Okay, fine. The game has an easier difficulty. Oh, that's a problem. It's too easy. You're not being reasonable, Mayo. You're being ridiculously unreasonable. And this is just completely just baffling. Come on.
It is not good. Sifu is a skill-based game. Launching with just the one difficulty was a statement that they were confident in their vision. They wanted a game that demanded players learn how to play it well to find success. I respect that a lot. However, a lot of people simply couldn't overcome the brutal challenge presented in level 2, and they quit the game. Many people called for an easy mode, and plenty of snobby players just belittled them for sucking or not wanting to learn. Look, Sifu isn't just a hard game. It's a game that poorly communicates its core mechanics. That's why I so desperately wanted this update to introduce a mechanics tutorial. If it's not gonna have that, then an easy mode is fine.
Oh man, okay, look. You want a mechanics tutorial now. I thought you said games like this, I thought you liked the difficulty. That's the whole point of it being difficult. You don't want the game to hold your hand. If it teaches you every single mechanic in the game, you would just know how to do it. There would be no, how Dark Souls doesn't teach you every specific mechanic? So you're learning the mechanics on your own. That's part of the difficulty. That's part of the challenge. And it's a roguelike, so it's supposed to be like that anyway. So now you're going to kill some of that by introducing a mechanics option, which anybody can just go to, learn all the mechanics, and then realize all the secrets of the game, and then just beat it easier. No, the whole point of Sifu, it's supposed to be challenging. It's supposed to be a very hard and challenging experience. That's the point. This is a part of the challenge. The fact that it doesn't teach you every mechanic. It just teaches you its most important mechanics. And he accused it of not teaching you the most important mechanics. Objectively wrong, because the game teaches you, again, how to dodge, weave, parry, and block. So where are you getting this from? You're complaining about an easy mode, but now you're adding, a new requirement. It should have had a mechanics tutorial. What game do you know has a mechanics tutorial, Mayo? Go ahead, give me 3 games that have a mechanics tutorial. 3 at least. None. Kingdom Hearts doesn't, Devil May Cry doesn't, Bayonetta doesn't. I doubt it. I don't think Bayonetta does. Zelda Breath of the Wild, does that have it? Are you serious? Does Elden Ring have a mechanics tutorial? Does Dark Souls have a mechanics tutorial? Okay, does Kingdom Hearts have a mechanics tutorial? Does Kingdom Hearts 2 have a mechanics tutorial? No. So what are you talking about? These games don't, but suddenly this game has to, or else its easy mode sucks. Get out of here, Mayo. That's bullshit. Get the fuck out of here. That is unfair and unreasonable towards the game, and you know it.
But it has to be something that acts as a bridge to the normal difficulty, which is where the real game is found. And this is why Sifu's new easy mode is an embarrassing failure.
Don't accuse it of something that isn't fucking true. What are you talking about? It's not a failure, you ding-a-ling, because it succeeds. And here's how it succeeds, because you still have to utilize the game's mechanics in order for you, and it teaches you basic mechanics that you need. The dodging, the weaving, the parrying, the blocking, it teaches you that, and you gotta utilize that to win, even on an easier difficulty. So that means if you have to utilize mechanics just to beat these bosses, and you can't just spam, unless you've mastered Tenkaichi 3 with one hand, by the way, then that means the game has succeeded in what it was trying to do. So that's wrong. Slow clap, please, for the love of God. Please realize that you did a fantastic job with not only this game, but specifically your easier difficulty, as it still requires unbelievable challenge. And you did a very good job with the game's mechanics, because when you learn the mechanics that the game shows you, that you claimed it didn't, then when you learn these mechanics, you do a much better job at the game. And that's great video game design.
To start off, you have more health, enemies are less aggressive, they react less defensively, and they have simpler attack patterns. Okay, perfect. That's all we need. If they had just left it at that, we would have an easier version of the game that lets people get away with mashier, sloppier offense and weak defense, but they would still eventually run out of lives and have to reevaluate their play.
You just pointed out one of the things that made it easier, even though it's still hard. So what is the problem? What is wrong? And it's not like it babies you. The game does not hold your hand, so it's still hard. What is the problem, Mayo? What? Mashier or sloppier offense, you can't play it that way. If you try to play Sifu with mashier or sloppier offense, the game will punish you for it. Big time. You get punished in the game when you try and do that, especially if you fight some of the hardest bosses in the game. Try spamming that woman with the chain. Try spamming the dude with the staff. Try spamming Yang. You can't even use your focus bar on Yang. What are you talking about? Actually, you have to reevaluate your play every time you die. Every time you die, you have to think about what mechanics work and what don't. Depending on your play style, what works for you and what doesn't. So whatever doesn't work for you, you don't really, you got to set that aside. But whatever does work for you, you got to utilize that to your advantage. That's what makes it hard. And sometimes you have to pick and choose when to do certain things. I'll use this mechanic in Sifu later when I need it. I'll use this mechanic in Sifu now. This is a very hard game. And again, it's roguelike. So it's one of those games where it's just not easy. It's very rough. And you have to have an understanding of the game's mechanics, and the game does a good job of teaching you the most important mechanics. That way, if you try to learn other mechanics, it can actually help you. So that's not accurate. Little by little, players would realize they should be blocking, trying to avoid attacks. This is something that I realized on the Disciple difficulty, and this is also something that I realized on the Student difficulty. That's right. When I played it on Student, I realized I need to be blocking. Wait, I need to dodge. Wait, damn it. He understands the mechanics of the game. Shit, I can't just spam. Damn it. All right, let's see what I can do. And I had to figure out the mechanics of the game in order to succeed. And because of that, I was able to spare every single boss in the game. So again, Mayo's just wrong. The very thing he's accusing the game of not doing, it already does. If you spam attack on Student difficulty, that not only will they parry you, but other people will start ganging up on you. Dude, that's one of the reasons why I had such a rough time with Disciple difficulty. Because I would finally beat the club, I would get all the way to around the end of the game, but then I was too old by the time I got there. So if you slow down the aging process, you might have more of a fair shot. Some people are having a rough time with the game. This is to help those people, so that way when they get to Disciple, they can do it. Aging slowly. The fact that the game, again, puts you into a position where you can prepare for it, it means that it builds you up so that way when you get to Disciple difficulty, you're able to actually handle it. Yes, you are punished, because if you sit there and play sloppily and you don't utilize the video game's mechanics just to succeed, guess what? You're going to have an extremely rough time. And not only that, but guess what? You're going to keep aging more and more and more and more until you're not going to be able to do it anymore because you'll be too old. So it still punishes you. So that's not true. If you try and spam dash, a bunch of people will try to not only hit you with weapons, but they'll gang up on you. And I know because I've used dash super large amount of times, and the AI started being smart and learning my technique, so I had to change up my play style. That's right, and that went for Disciple and Student, so that's wrong. And I played on both difficulties, so you were wrong there already. And now if you try to spam the same attacks, they will parry you, and they'll start to retaliate based off of what you're doing, and they will start to fuck you the hell up. I don't just fight with random buttons in Sifu. I am really careful with how I'm actually playing that game, because if I'm not, I get fucked up.
It would just happen later in the game. You'd arrive at the tower on your first playthrough at age 65, instead of dying at the club for 2 days straight and getting frustrated and quitting. Little by little, players would realize that they should be blocking, trying to avoid attacks, not spamming attack all the time so they don't get parried, etc. but they went and ruined it by also making your character age much slower, only aging 1 year per death. So not only is it a lot easier to survive and defeat enemies, you're barely even punished for dying. I'll explain why this is such a massive issue. Because of the reduced enemy aggression and defense, it becomes very easy to defeat entire rooms by just mashing random buttons and spamming dash. You don't have to block, ever, much less avoid attacks and punish. You can just constantly be on the offense. Literally, you don't even need to touch the analog stick in many occasions.
So that's not true. You must block. Don't listen to him. He says you don't have to block ever. You're gonna die so quick. Don't listen to him. Please block. Don't forget to parry. Also dodge. Don't forget to block. Blocking is super essential in that game. Don't you ever listen to that terrible advice. No, don't listen to him. Because guess what? He even said earlier, how come the game doesn't teach you the mechanics about blocking and dodging and stuff like that? He even said that earlier. Now all of a sudden he's contradicting himself and saying, oh, well, actually, you could just sit there and be on the offense because it's an easier difficulty. Wrong. Even on student mode, if you try to be on the offense at all times, they will fuck you up, especially with their special attacks. Go to the club and try that shit. See how far it gets you. Go to some of these places. They will fuck you up. You have to know how to dodge these attacks. It's very important. That's not true. So what he's saying is completely wrong. And one of the ways that you're playing Sifu, when you block certain attacks, they have open windows in to attack them. That's a lot better than spamming. If you sit there and spam, you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. You're not utilizing the game's mechanics to its fullest potential. You're not utilizing the game's mechanics to help you beat the enemy. You want to beat the enemy? Dodge those attacks. Weave. Use dash. Block that. Utilize the dash mechanic. And because guess what? They have a counter for that too, even on student. If you try to spam dash, they're gonna fuck you up. You try to spam the same attack, they're gonna fuck you up. So that's not true. Utilize as many of the game's mechanics as you possibly can. Do the best that you can, because the game will punish you regardless. You have to be ready. That's how Sifu is, regardless of what difficulty you play on. You don't even need to touch the analog stick. Oh, really? I don't have to touch the analog stick for Tenkaichi 3. I could just beat every single enemy with one hand. Does that mean Tenkaichi 3 is imbalanced? No. It means that I have started to master the game, so I can't blame the game for me mastering it. That's not fair to the game. I played student difficulty without using avoids, and the game punished me for it, so then I had to keep learning how to use it, and it forced me to learn how to use it. I got frustrated because I was like, no, I don't feel like doing that. I don't even know. I'm gonna tell you a secret. The truth is, dude, parrying is not easy. Dodging is not easy, okay? For me, it's not easy. But Sifu forced me into it so much that now it's become second nature. That's excellent. That means the game is actually teaching me without having to tell me directly. But yet the game tells you directly anyway in the very beginning tutorial. This is how you dodge, this is how you block, this is how you do this is how you do that. It tells you a lot of those mechanics anyway. So eventually I had to start utilizing it. And when I did, I just started doing even better. So what the heck?
Due to the enemy magnetism and never having to use avoids, you can get through a lot of the game one-handed. This is not an exaggeration.
Hey, Abel, what are you doing?
I'm playing Sifu.
But that's not how you play Sifu.
It's easy mode.
Easy mode.
Yeah.
Are you having fun?
No.
Alright, Mayo. Tenkaichi 2. One hand. One hand. Does that mean that this game is imbalanced? Does that mean that this game is imbalanced, Mayo? Does that mean that this game is imbalanced? No. Jesus. You have to allow the game to push you into its systems. And it's funny, because it's doing it through challenge. As you've stated, Mayo, you claim that a game should push you into its systems through challenge. That's exactly what Sifu does, especially. And yet you're complaining about it whenever, oh, it has an easier difficulty. This is ridiculous. Because you're the same one that claimed that Sifu does a bad job of pushing you into its mechanics. Now it has an easier difficulty and you're still complaining. You make no sense.
Heavy enemies like the bodyguard and disciples can still screw you up, you'll die a few times, and boss fights will knock off a few years too, but it just doesn't matter because there's not a chance in hell that you'll ever get a game over, even if it's your first time playing. So if there's no threat of a game over, why would anyone care about how many times they die while playing terribly and not learning anything? If you still aged exponentially, you would feel the need to play a little smarter, learn a thing or two here and there. But on top of there being no consequence to dying over and over,
I can do the same thing with Tenkaichi 3 with just one hand. So what? If you master the game, that's not fair to the actual game itself. Who cares? I can play Tenkaichi 3 with one hand. Does that matter? No, it doesn't matter, dude. Because even though I can play it with one hand, guess what? The game is still refined and balanced. That's all that matters. Yeah, I learned by playing on student difficulty. I learned how to block, I learned how to dodge, I learned how to parry better. I got better at all of these things. I also learned how to utilize the game's mechanics to my advantage. And I learned how to even beat and spare bosses. I got so good at the mechanics of Sifu thanks to student mode, especially, thank you Slow Clap, that I was able to literally parry bosses so much that I could stop them and break their structures so much I could spare them and choose when I wanted to spare them. I can still do that. I can just choose when I feel like sparing them and when I feel like not sparing them. Yeah, I have full control over the situation when I fight a boss. That means the game did a great job of pushing me into its systems. By the way, that style meter analogy was one of the worst. The fact that that's all you could think of, what could they do to make this better? Not mechanics, not the systems, but the style meter. It does not need a style meter, that is unnecessary. Now if it had it, that would be the cherry on top, but it doesn't really need that. Because Sifu is not that kind of game. It's not Ultra Kill, it's not Devil May Cry, so it's not necessary. Again, a lot of people struggled with this, even on the student difficulty and even left during the club. This happened on the student difficulty and disciple, so that's not true. There are people who struggle with this game, period. People care about how many times they die because if you die too many times, you'll be too old to face Yang. That's happened, you know, especially on disciple difficulty. So again, that's why people do care and you have to still stay focused. And it's still challenging because you can't spam just to win either. You're just really good at the game, so it might be much easier for you than the average player. But you can't have your experience be the objective experience for everybody else. By the way, there is a consequence to dying over and over. You might be too old to face Yang, so that's not true.
There's also a new shrine option called Rejuvenate that recovers 5 years of your life at the cost of only 1,000 XP, and you can buy it at every shrine. Are you doing the math on this? You only age 1 year with every death, no matter how many deaths you have. So with 3 shrines per level with opportunities to rejuvenate at each one, that means you can die 15 times for free every level. And you'll always have XP to rejuvenate because the game is so easily beaten by brainless mashing that there's zero need to unlock new skills and try new tactics to survive because you're in no danger. You don't need to invest in focus bar upgrades because focus isn't needed ever because everyone dies to mashing anyway.
Can't brainlessly mash because you have to utilize the mechanics in order to beat certain enemies or else they'll parry and dodge and block you. Therefore, you cannot just sit there and spam because they'll start utilizing the same mechanics you have against you. I was forced to try new tactics. I was forced to dodge, block, parry, and start weaving and evading enemy maneuvers. I was forced to do all these things that I did not want to do. I wanted to just be able to fight, and I couldn't just do that. I had to actually utilize multiple mechanics in the game in order to actually succeed. So again, inaccurate and factually incorrect. You mean the health refill takedowns? That's also in Disciple mode. What are you talking about? So you were just wrong, period. You realize that even on Disciple difficulty, Sifu will give you health during takedowns, so you didn't even get that right.
And you don't need to invest in your structure bar because there's no need to ever block. I just played through the whole game without blocking once or using focus attacks, mashing and dashing randomly like a moron, rejuvenating at shrines, and I beat the entire game effortlessly at age 27. They've completely removed even the slightest possibility of getting a game over, even on the first playthrough for a new player. They even have random enemies give you full health refills during combat from time to time. And I know what some of you are saying. LOL, Mayo, it's an easy mode. What did you expect? Look, there are different degrees of difficulty even in easy modes. I make a lot of comparisons to Resident Evil on this channel, and I'll do it again here. Resident Evil has an easy mode that gives you a lot more ammo, health, and save opportunities, and lowers the enemy count. That makes it a lot easier. But you still have to play the game. They don't also give you waypoints showing you where to go, an inventory 3 times the size, and put every puzzle item in the middle of the fucking starting room. What would be the point of even playing the game at that point? Sifu is a game that has to be appreciated to be enjoyed. You have to get it. And we should want more people to get it. We should want more players to be playing games like these that demand skill, because then we'll see more of these games. Sifu's easy mode should make players feel confident about stepping up the difficulty. But when there's no consequence for playing terribly from start to finish, they're not gonna learn anything. I've been waiting until this update came out to recommend the game to some of my friends because I know they're really gonna struggle with the normal difficulty and they're gonna give up. I was hoping that easy mode would just tone it down in certain areas, but still give an experience that wants them to learn its mechanics in order to beat the game, because then it gets addictive and you want more. But this is a travesty. And I hope this answers the question of why do you care about easy mode when it's not made for you? I know that, okay? I know it's not made for me. That's my whole point. It's supposed to be made for people who had trouble playing normal mode, but it ignores normal mode's instructional issues and delivers an experience that does absolutely nothing to prepare you to move upwards. It demonstrates a staggering lack of awareness. No, I am not playing easy mode, but I care a lot about the experience of other players who need help getting into this game. But apparently no one is interested in actually helping them, just giving them an option to go play around with their toys in the sandbox. When talking about difficulty in games, Dark Souls gets brought up a lot, or Sekiro or Elden Ring, and a lot of Dark Souls players are against the inclusion of an easy mode. Now, I'm not a Souls player, I'm not here to take sides in that argument. But Souls players, hear me out. Let's say that hypothetically, there was going to be an easy mode added to Dark Souls. It's happening, there's nothing you can do about it. What kind of easy mode would you prefer? 1, an easy mode that allows you to mash your way through the entire game and all boss fights with no danger of ever dying. Or 2, a lighter version of the main game experience that helps lesser skilled players ease into the game's mechanics at a slower, less brutal pace, and ends up with them eventually learning to play intelligently and wanting to raise the difficulty to see the true experience.
LOL, Mayo, it's an easy mode. What did you expect? No, they give you health during takedowns in Disciple as well. So what in the world are you getting this from? You can't compare a survival third-person horror game to an action fighting game. They're not the same kind of game. One of them requires resource management, something you obsess over seemingly, and the other, or apparently, and the other requires action, timing, and patterns. There's a difference. You can't compare those two. That's a false equivalence. Sifu is a game that has to be appreciated to be enjoyed. Alright, there goes something we agree on. I definitely give you leeway on that one. Yeah, that's true. Sifu, you have to get it. But the thing is, you can get it on regardless of what difficulty it is. What matters is if you just get it. That's what matters. Yes, games that demand skill, and Sifu demands skill regardless of what difficulty you play on. Sifu's student mode made me confident about stepping up the difficulty to Disciple. I did have a rough time, but it still made me confident in doing so, and I still feel confident in doing that. There is a consequence for playing terribly. Again, if you don't dodge, if you don't parry, if you don't weave, they will dodge, they will parry, they will weave, and that will affect you greatly when you're trying to fight them, especially during boss fights. You will be punished greatly. Try fighting the woman with the chain and just spam. Try fighting the second girl with the kunai knife who wants to kill you and then spam. Try facing Yang and then spam. Yeah, not gonna happen. So again, you are punished and there is a consequence to that, regardless of whether you're playing on Disciple or Student. Please do not listen to Under the Mayo. You will learn. You just have to allow the game to push you into its systems. It's gonna be really rough, but you have to allow it to push you into those systems. Also, utilize the mechanics that the game shows you, because the game shows you in the tutorial. Use those. The game also shows you in the first level. Use those. Each mechanic that the game decides to reveal to the player is very important. You should probably be utilizing that. It is addictive and you want more. Not only that, but you crave a higher difficulty because you realize, man, I'm mastering this game now. I want to play on a higher difficulty and test my skills. Hell yes, that's exactly how I feel about Sifu. Thanks to the student mode. Thank you, Slow Clap. Mayo, you are wrong because you still are gauging, you're still being gauged through the systems based off of challenge. So that is not true. A travesty? Oh please, with all the brilliant mechanics and gameplay and combos and combo techniques in the game, I don't want to hear it, Mayo. And you haven't even proven that it is a tragedy. You just said, oh no, I could just spam. Okay, well guess what? You can literally use one hand on Tenkaichi. Does that mean it's imbalanced? No, people still love Tenkaichi and called it a very refined and balanced game. So what are you talking about? Okay, so if you know it's not made for you, you got to take into account that you're just really good at the game and you can't have a bias based off of being really good. Because if you're really good at a game, an easier mode is going to seem way easier because you've mastered the game way more than the average player. So to the average player, that easy mode is not going to seem as easy. Don't you understand that? It's supposed to be made for people who had trouble playing normal mode. Duh, that's what it's made for. And it works because you start to learn the mechanics of the game more, making you want to play Disciple. You said the same thing with Ultra Kill. It does nothing to prepare you to move upwards. Yes, it did. I was able to beat Yang because of this. What are you talking about? It literally prepared me, and I got so far. What are you talking about? And ended up sparing every single boss and even learned how to break their structure. I know how to break their structure now. That's what Student Mode did for me. It taught me the mechanics of the game by easing me into its systems through challenge. And because of its roguelite structure and the way that it game is, I had to actually learn the mechanics on my own by playing. And yes, it did teach you important mechanics like dodging and weaving, thank goodness, and parrying and blocking. I had to utilize that. The game taught me that. But everything else I had to teach myself by learning on my own, such as breaking someone's structure. I had to teach that myself. That was not easy to do. So that's incredible that the game is able to ease you into its systems. And you claim that, oh, it doesn't ease you enough, or the game is able to push you into its systems. And you claim that it didn't do a good job of doing so, and that's wrong because I was able to get all the way to Yang and beat him and even spare him. You care about the experience of other players. Well, don't speak for them because remember, you have a higher difficulty spike. You're better at the game than the average player. You even did this deathless. Okay? So that means if you play in easy mode, it's not going to be the same for you as it is for other people. So you're being biased. This point is null and void because people don't want an easier mode in Dark Souls and they're probably not ever going to add one. From Software doesn't want to add an easier mode because fans like the actual natural difficulty. They're attached to it. So they don't want anything like that in there, and they don't want casuals to show up and be like, hey, I can play Dark Souls now because there's an easier mode. They don't want any of that. Or, man, this game is actually easier. Oh no, part of the charm of Dark Souls is its difficulty. That's something that they love and they can't help it. Now, I love Dark Souls. It's a masterpiece. But me personally, I don't mind an easier mode. I don't care. And I really don't see the big deal, but that's just me. Remember, I'm not a diehard From Software guy, but I am a huge diehard Dark Souls fanboy. I love Dark Souls. It's excellent. It's a masterpiece. And I really just would not mind an easier mode. I wouldn't mind it. Yeah, that's just me. You know, so hey, it's okay. Luckily, Slow Clap actually added an easier mode to Sifu. Isn't that a great thing? Something you won't even acknowledge? Isn't that great? But of course, you won't even acknowledge it, and instead you decide to say that, oh, there's something wrong with it. Oh, it's not good enough, when really that's just the fact that you got better at the game. So the easier mode is not going to be experienced the same way from you as it would be another casual player. Mashing your way through the entire game in boss fights, you cannot do that in Sifu. You have to utilize the mechanics. You have to utilize parrying. You have to utilize blocking because they're going to parry you. Oh no, I spammed this technique. Oh, parried. Oh no, I just did this. Oh, he dodged it. Damn it. Son of a bitch. Uh-oh, a special attack is coming. Looks like I better block that. It looks like I better dodge that. Yeah, you're going to have to use different techniques to beat people regardless of whether you're playing student or disciple. Helps lesser skilled players ease into the game's mechanics. Dude, that's exactly what student mode is. What are you talking about? You just don't experience it the same way because you played this game deathless on disciple. So that's why you've mastered the game so much that when you come back to the game, it's just easier for you. That's what you're not realizing. The game does ease you. I'm a perfect example of it because now I can spare every single boss in the game and break their structure. And that's thanks to Slow Clap's student difficulty. It taught me how to actually play the game better. Yes, I actually played the game on student difficulty, and I learned how to play the game because of it. How does it fall apart? Explain, break it down, and if you can't, you're just making objective claims without having the facts to back that. Because guess what? Dude, when you age tremendously in Disciple. And by the time you get to Yang, you might be too old to even fight him. That's probably why they slowed down the aging process for an easier difficulty. You're angry that the easier difficulty slows down the aging? Are you serious? You're not being reasonable here, especially since you played this deathless. So how are you going to talk when you have an experience with the game different from how the casual might experience it? Mayo, you can't accuse more than multiple games of the exact same issue. You've done this multiple times. Oh no, it doesn't ease you into its systems enough. It doesn't teach you how to prepare for the higher boss fights. You sound illegitimate. I think you lose credibility when you do that. Because that's not even true anyway towards the game, because the game does a very good job of not only teaching you some of its core mechanics, which you also claimed, which is also wrong, but it also does a great job of pushing you into its systems through challenge, because it's a roguelike. So you can't just immediately, just win and shit. You have to actually do things to survive, man. So that's not true. The easy mode does help you learn at a slower pace. That's why it's not as punishing, but it's still very hard and very punishing. You see, the game is still punishing, it's just a little more lenient. That's the thing. So what? The game still maintained its challenge, so it's still fun to play even on student. That's the point. And you even brought up yourself and used Dark Souls as a comparison. Would you rather you just spam, which you cannot do in this game? Or would you rather you just have something that eases you into its mechanics and systems? Okay, but that's what it does. It does a better job of doing that. So what are you talking about? It's ridiculous. In a mechanics tutorial, you would just win the game all the time because you know every single specific mechanic in the game. That could potentially defeat the purpose of it pushing you into its system through challenge, because now you know every single mechanic. So what the heck?
I cannot imagine that a single Souls fan wouldn't pick the second option. That's what Sifu needed, and it's ruined by the changes to the aging system and the ability to rejuvenate. The entire game falls apart, and it really concerns me because it makes me feel like Slow Clap has completely misunderstood people's issues with their game's difficulty. The problem wasn't that they couldn't just play dumb and get away with it. The problem was that the game does a shitty job at teaching players the skills they need to survive. And instead of making a mechanics tutorial, or making an easy mode that helps people learn the game at a slower pace, they've just said, fuck it, if you can't deal with our crappy design, just go mash buttons in easy mode, because that must be what you want.
Excuse me. The design is not crappy. Just because, again, you play the game a certain way, doesn't mean that their design is crappy. You better get the fuck out of here with that. That's very disrespectful towards such an incredible game with a robust combat system and incredible mechanics. You better show that's a little bit more decency and a little bit more respect than just saying a shitty way of doing this and just brushing past what they did. That was disrespectful. That is very inaccurate, because they do a great job of teaching you its mechanics. They show you the core mechanics, but they don't teach you too much, so that way it's still a challenge. So don't even.
And that pisses me off. I'm pissed off because this game is really fucking good. It sucks that so many people dropped it because of how poorly it guides players into its mechanics. Now with this update, it looks like that issue isn't going to be fixed, and it's a fucking shame. Why can we still not skip cutscenes? Like and subscribe. Bye.
You're pissed off because this game is really fucking good. What the hell? What? Yeah, it's really fucking good. What's the problem here? Again, stop saying the same thing you said about Ultra Kill. Oh, it poorly guides you into its mechanics. You're repeating yourself. This sounds like a you problem, not a game problem, because you keep repeating the same thing. You repeated yourself, and you repeated the exact same criticism for more than 2 games. Come on, dude, that's ridiculous. Didn't you do this for multiple games? Really? You can't repeat the same exact criticism for the game and think that it's just suddenly right because you said the exact same thing. Isn't it convenient that Sifu just so happens to be guilty of the same flaws Ultra Kill? What are the odds of that? Sounds like a you problem, not a game problem. The game does not do a terrible job of easing you into its mechanics. It teaches you its core mechanics in the game. I keep repeating it because it's true. Not only that, but then throughout the game, if you play on student difficulty, it does a really good job of easing you into its systems, but yet it still maintains its challenge. So that's also not true. You're so entitled. Yeah, come on, you don't gotta act like that. You're just really entitled. Why can't we skip cutscenes? Like and subscribe. Like, oh, get over yourself. Mayo, you have such a ridiculous ego and it's unbelievable. Okay, that was unreasonable, ridiculous, over the top, and just ridiculous. Slow Clap, you did a fantastic job of actually easing people into its systems. In your student mode difficulty, people can actually have the chance to actually learn the game's mechanics, and you can't just spam either, because if you do, the game punishes you even on student mode. Also, I love your arena mode additions. You did a fantastic job with the arena mode. It's fantastic. And honestly, this game is extremely refined and extremely balanced. And he is being extremely unreasonable because he is better at the game. So when he plays the easier difficulty, he's going to experience it differently. And then at the end there, he's being all entitled, which really starts to make you lose credibility. Just saying. So, this is my response to Sifu. No, it does not need a goddamn style meter, okay? That was ridiculous. And Sifu is a very, very mechanically solid game. And Mayo's being extremely unreasonable and entitled. Thank you so much for watching. This was Tarragon, and thank you for watching.